Hey, welcome back to the stash. There's something about seeing Superman and Spider-Man together that just feels right. I mean, come on, it taps into something far deeper than just any ordinary crossover. These are the two characters, the two icons that define what superheroes are supposed to be. One represents hope on a global scale, while the other represents hope on a human one. And when put together, it should simply feel special. So when this new Superman-Spider-Man crossover issue dropped, I was beyond excited. So excited that as soon as I got the chance to, I instantly went out to pick up multiple copies of the comic because I just simply needed to. Now, besides the fact that we haven't gotten this pairing in an ungodly amount of years, this was Marvel and DC's big chance to remind people why this pairing matters in the first place. And after reading it, yeah, it does. I'd argue it succeeds in flying colors. It was just so good, especially the main story by Mark Waid and one of my favorite modern artists, Jorge Jimenez, rightfully standing out the most. But even besides just that one, it felt like each and every story just owned the space properly, and as a result gave us the perfect crossover comic. Well, almost perfect?
What?
Because at its best, the comic captures everything you'd want from these characters. It delivers moments that feel iconic, understands who they are at their core, and it lets them actually be heroes in a way that feels genuine. But at its worst, with one story in particular, it completely misses the point. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the brand new Superman Spider-Man crossover issue. But hey, real quick, here at the Stash, we're swinging for 26,000 subscribers. That's a tall order. I know with great power comes great responsibility. And all I'm gonna do is click subscribe. So if you're into Spider-Man, Superman, or just comic book deep dives, feel free to stick around. Also, be sure to stay to the very end for another episode of Comics from the Stash. This time we're going over my very own copies of the Superman Spider-Man crossover. But with that all said, let's get right back into the video. This is the story. The main story, the reason this book works, because Mark Waid understands something that not everyone does. He understands that you don't need to reinvent these characters, but just need to simply let them be who they are. From the moment this story starts, there's a tone to it. It feels classic, energetic, and most importantly, right at the same time. The way Superman and Spider-Man interact feels natural, and my god, is their dynamic just so much fun to read. I mean, I got a real sense of mutual respect there. Almost like they both recognize what the other one stands for, and that for me is where the story shines, because instead of tearing them down or trying to deconstruct them, it builds them up. There are genuine moments in this story where you just feel it, where Superman steps in and you're reminded why he's the symbol of hope, where Spider-Man swings into action and you're reminded why he never stops trying, no matter how hard things get. And when they're working together, there's this prestige feeling about it, even though at the end of the day, it's still just two heroes saving the world. And man, what about the climax of the story? I swear to god, I can't remember the last time a comic made me feel so happy, like this one did when I read it. From Superman telling Spidey he believes in him, to the webhead recreating If This Be My Destiny, to the final swing and fly between the two icons of Marvel and DC. It's just so fucking good. It's so good, and I was literally beside myself reading it. It's what makes this story hit as well as it does, because it gives you these iconic moments, the kind of moments where you can picture the panel in your head even after you close the book. And I have to mention the scene where Superman lifts Brainiac's ship with the power of the yellow sun coursing throughout. It's just beautiful. It is wholeheartedly Superman in the best way possible. Plus, I just love how even when Spider-Man was lifting the rubble to flip the switch, the both of them were just completely in sync when it matters most. There's no unnecessary complication nor forced commentary. It's just pure, unapologetic superhero storytelling. And the art plays a huge role in that as well, with this beautiful display throughout provided by Jimenez. There's a sense of scale when Superman is on the page, and a sense of movement when Spider-Man is in motion. And when those two styles collide, it creates something that just feels well and truly alive. Plus, he just absolutely nails it. Literally every splash page or panel is amazing to look at. Not to mention that his Peter Parker design also rocks. But anyway, as a result, the artwork complements the story in ways that just super rare at times. Overall though, for this particular story, there's just something about it. Something that feels like it understands why people fell in love with these characters in the first place, and it doesn't try to distance itself from that as well, which works massively in its favor. Instead, it embraces it, which is exactly what a crossover like this should do. But then there's this, the story by Tom King. And I'm just gonna be straight up, this was the worst part of the book for me because it completely misunderstands what this crossover is supposed to be, as well as completely misunderstands the characters as well. It's a real shame too, and I'm kinda confused why he even got the nod in the first place to write the comic. Like, for the most part, I really enjoyed his Woman of Tomorrow series, but the more and more I read of him, the more painfully obvious it's becoming that that was just a fluke. Because on paper, the concept sounds like it should work. You got Superman and Lois, you got Spider-Man and Mary Jane, as well as the threat in the form of a Sentinel. That should be enough, but instead of focusing on that, this story somewhat shifts its attention somewhere else near the end, and that's to Gambit, and somehow, he ends up being the one who basically saves the day, in a Superman and Spider-Man crossover. Plus, be for real, Superman and Spider-Man could have easily destroyed the Sentinel. All in all, it's a story that just doesn't make sense, and it feels like it was almost written in spite of the characters, because the whole point of a crossover like this is to see these two heroes rise to the occasion, not to have the resolution handed off to someone else entirely. Because it literally takes away from the payoff and makes the entire conflict feel pointless. I mean, it left me sitting there thinking, why aren't Superman and Spider-Man the ones actually saving the day when they absolutely could and should easily? And yet, for some reason, the story just doesn't let them, and that's only part of the problem, because the other big problem I've got with this story has got to be the dialogue. The dialogue in this one it's rough, it's really rough. Firstly, Spider-Man doesn't feel like Spider-Man at all. He came across as overly awkward and fragile to the point where he honestly just felt sad to read for the brief amount of speech bubbles he had. And it's like Tom King wrote Spidey to be a version of the character that's been dialed up to the point where it feels like a bad parody of the Tobey Maguire movies. Hello everyone, I'm currently editing, and this is me in post. I just wanted to quickly say, since I didn't mention it in the original video, Mary Jane would not say this. Okay, she just wouldn't say this. It makes zero sense for her to say this, considering the history that she also shared with Gwen as one of her closest friends. You know, this is like ignoring her reaction after the death. The most crucial part of her character was Gwen Stacy's death, because it was it set off a chain reaction where she became more mature and serious about life. Not to mention, this also kind of ruins the ending of Spider-Man Blue, where MJ is still very clearly hung up and traumatized from Gwen Stacy's death. So yeah, another part of the dialogue which just sucks, and it's unfortunate that Tom King just kind of felt like he was writing these characters like he didn't like them at all. But yeah, I just had to quickly say that. Back to the video. But then there's also the stuff with Mary Jane Watson and Lois Lane, which is clearly trying to say something. You can tell it's aiming for commentary, but the way it's handled just doesn't land in my opinion. There's this focus on them talking about being saved over the years, and it comes across as Tom King patronizing the two characters while disrespecting their decades of history filled with great stories. Plus, if Tom King wasn't so focused, basically reducing them purely to being damsels in distress through their dialogue, he messed up such a good mini story beat for the comic. It's told that MJ and Lois, when the Sentinel attacked, saved the kids in the bus, essentially sacrificing themselves if not for Spider-Man and Superman. But instead of, showing us any of this, it's reduced to a short explanation before King reduces their characters to nothing more than a potential casualty. In my personal opinion, the story would have worked way better and would have benefited way more if they axed all the pointless Gambit screen time and gave it to Lois and MJ so we can actually see them save the kids from the bus. That to me should have been the focus. That should have been the scene that defines them in the story. But instead of leaning into that, the story shifts into dialogue that feels self-aware in a way that just pulls you right out of it. Tom King, in my opinion, should have cut the commentary, focus on the action, and show MJ and Lois being heroes in the moment, allowing their actions to speak for themselves. Plus, then there's also the ending, which also just doesn't feel right, because when you look at these two couples, Peter and MJ, Clark and Lois, to me there's a clear warmth there, a sincerity, and a sense that these relationships are built on love that's been tested and proven over time. And this story, in my opinion, just doesn't capture that at all. The tone feels off, the dialogue once again feels off, and instead of ending on something that reinforces what these relationships mean, it just kind of fades out, doesn't even really say anything. Plus, these are the two couples in Marvel and DC that are basically known for unapologetically loving their partner, and King didn't even come close to that vibe. And that's what makes it so frustrating, because this didn't need to be complicated, it just needed to understand the assignment, and my god, did he fail in every way possible. But then, there's this story by Jeff Lemire, and this one is smaller. Much smaller, but in a way, that's exactly why it works. Because instead of trying to go big, it goes for far more personal in ways that simply bring the warmth that naturally comes with characters like Superman and Spider-Man. This story focuses on a moment and a feeling, one that doesn't rely on spectacle to leave an impact. And it understands something super important. Not every Superman and Spider-Man story needs to be about saving the world. Sometimes it's about reminding you why they do it in the first place. It's one of the reasons as to why I loved the story Generation so much from Superman Red and Blue. There's a sincerity to the story, one that instantly grabs your attention with a quietness that contrasts everything else in the book. Not to mention this also works extremely well as a prequel to the main plot by Mark Waid. Anyway though, it sticks with you, because the writer and artist clearly trust the story to have an effect on the reader even if it's much smaller. I mean, that for me is exactly why it stands out, because even in a book filled with bigger ideas, it still finds a way to be meaningful without needing to compete. Now this crossover for the most part is absolutely incredible, but for that tiny other part, it's also a weird one, because it shows you both sides of what these stories can be. At its best, it reminds you why Superman and Spider-Man matter, why they've lasted this long, and why seeing them together still feels special, and that's largely thanks to the Mark Waid story. That's the version of this crossover that works, the one that understands these characters, the ones that lets them be heroes without overthinking it. But at its worst, it shows you what happens when that understanding isn't there, when the focus shifts, the tone feels off, and the characters stop feeling like themselves. That's where the Tom King story falls apart for me. But then somewhere in between, you've got Jeff Lemire's story. Quiet, simple, effective tale that shows why Superman and Spider-Man turned out to be the good people that they are today, as well as a reminder that sometimes the smallest moments can be the ones that matter the most. Now I know in this video we didn't take a look at every story, and they are still really good stories, but these were the ones that just, for me, stuck out more than the rest. And while one in particular lacked a lot in quality, I don't want it to overshadow just how good the rest of this comic is, because in my opinion, this is truly a special issue, and that's pretty rare within the current state of the industry. At the end of the day though, the reason this book is worth reading mostly comes down to one thing. Because for a few stories, you get to see Superman and Spider-Man exactly as they're meant to be, standing side by side, saving the day, and reminding you, me, and millions of other people, remind ourselves why we fell in love with the wonderful world of comics in the first place. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Comics from the Stash. Today is a very short, yet still fun episode as we're going over my 2 issues of Superman and Spider-Man. So to kick things off, we'll start with the original release. Cover A by Jorge Jimenez, and even though it's the standard edition of this comic, it's still easily one of, if not my favorite, out of the bunch Marvel and DC released. But then besides that one, I also managed to pick up the Jim Lee variant cover, and I still really love how this one looks. But that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, because here, this support means so much. And yeah, thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.